Hi there, welcome back. We will now be looking at what we call as a sync-async bridge. So previously we saw an async-sync bridge where we were getting an asynchronous request, making a synchronous call and pushing an asynchronous response back. A sync-async bridge is a bang opposite, and I'll explain that with this picture that we want. Now let's assume that the trigger of the interface is a SOAP sender scenario. So the message is being triggered by a SOAP sending system. It's a synchronous call. So PI is going to get that synchronous request, and now the SOAP is waiting for the response. Now the expectation is PI is going to push the file to a receiver file adapter, and once PI pushes the file to a receiver file adapter, there's another system that's going to pick up the file, process the file, and create a response back as a file. PI is supposed to pick up that file and then respond with the data of that file back to the SOAP call. So the SOAP call will continue to wait till we get the response back from this particular file. So it is the bang opposite of any scenarios that we saw where any synchronous scenario that we saw where everything was when we were dealing with SOAP where it was an end-to-end synchronous. Now in this case, the SOAP sending system triggers the call to PI, it waits for the response, PI pushes the file, there's another file adapter that then picks up and looks for another file, picks up the file and then pushes it back and responds to the original message that is called the SOAP. Okay, the number of service interfaces that are required in this case, in fact it is going to be an asynchronous outbound request. This is going to be a synchronous service interface. You need an asynchronous service interface here, an asynchronous inbound service interface here, and an asynchronous outbound service interface. So we're going to define 3 service interfaces, and we'll build the scenario as we go. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead with our enterprise service repository. As always, I'm going to create a namespace. I'm going to call it training.com sync-async bridge underscore SOAP to file, okay, underscore 00. All right, and I'm gonna call it namespace for sync-async bridge for SOAP to file scenario. All right, so my namespace has been created. It's called sync-async bridge. Here it is. I'll close this. Now I'll go ahead and create a data type. So the data type I'm going to create for the request is going to contain 2 fields. Let's call it DT sync-async bridge underscore request underscore 00. All right, I've just created 2 fields. Insert sub element. Let's call it field 1. Insert sub element. Oops, sorry. Insert element. Field 2. Both of it, let's call it string. All right, now the expectation is that the response is going to be a concatenation of this. Let's say this is a service where we are going to concatenate, so I'm going to call it response, and here I'm going to call insert sub element and say field and say XSG type string. All right, so 2 data type, one for the request and one for the response is done. Let's create a message type, empty underscore request, empty underscore sync async bridge underscore request underscore 00, and my data type is going to be the request data type. All right, next we're going to create a message type. I'll say create empty sync async bridge for response, and my message type for data type for this is by response data type, and I'm done. All right, next is going to be to create a service interface. So the first service interface that we are going to create is for the SOAP. So it's going to be outbound synchronous sync async bridge underscore 00. All right, and here it's going to be outbound, it's going to be synchronous. My request is going to be this message type. Oops, I'll do that again. And my request is going to be the request. My response is going to be here the response. So the request and the response is done. Perfect. Now I'm going to create another service interface. It's SIIA sync async bridge underscore file underscore request underscore 00, because this is going to contain the request file. So it's going to be inbound, it's going to be asynchronous, and it's going to contain the request file. Right? Perfect. Next, I'm going to create another service interface, outbound asynchronous Sync-Async bridge underscore outbound asynchronous Sync-Async underscore file underscore response. Alright, so now, so the file is going to just be the same file. We are not going to change anything. So the request here is going to continue to be the message type here is going to be the response message type, or for that matter, let's create it the response. So this is going to contain the concatenated text. All right. Now that is also done. So with this, let's build our mappings. So there's no mapping required because in this case we are assuming that whatever is the request is going to be the response. But just to generate our XML structures, let's create a test mapping. I'm just going to call it mapping test because otherwise to create it manually is going to be painful. So I'm just going to call a mapping test, and I'm just creating the request, going into the test mode, and I'll say, hey, field 1 is let's say field 1, let's just call it field 1, and let's call field 2, right? So this is my request structure, this is my request XML. So let's save this. Sync-Async rec.xml. All right, my response is going to be, so to get my response structure, I'm going to just drag the response here, and I'm going into the test mode. It is going to be the concatenated field 1, field 2, field 1, field 2. All right, say source again here, and say new, control V, I'll say Sync-Async response dot XML. All right, so now let's go ahead and activate our change list here. We are not having any mapping. We've just defined our data type, our message type, and 3 service interfaces. All right, perfect. I'll not save this mapping. I'll say do not save. This is a dummy mapping that we did. With this, our configuration here is done. Let's go ahead now into my training folder. I'll say folder create Sync-Async bridge underscore file soap to file underscore 00. All right, now we'll create a sender soap adapter. My sender soap adapter, now let's use our business system file system 00 and say cc underscore Sync-Async bridge underscore soap underscore sender underscore 00. All right, so I'm going to make the adapter type a soap. Make sure it is best effort. Perfect. Just save the channel. Next, we are going to create a new receiver communication channel, cc underscore Sync-Async bridge. I'm going to call it file underscore receiver underscore 00. All right, now here I'm going to go ahead, select the adapter type as file, make the direction as receiver, and give the directory as my target directory as training Sync-Async. All right, and I'll say here the message ID, the file name, let's look at my presentation. The file name is going to be star. All right, sorry, the file name is going to be using what we call as a variable name substitution. So I'm going to say percentage message ID Alright, so both the sending file, so when PI is creating the file, it will create the file name with the message ID, and when we are going to give the input file for the scenario 2 with the response, it will also have to be of the file name message ID. So I'm giving it as receiver, and I'm giving, instead in the target file name schema, I'm giving MID. I go into my processing, I say just create, I don't say anything, I just say create. I go into adapter advanced mode and say variable name substitution, say enable, and then here I'm going to say the variable MID has to be replaced with message colon message ID. Alright, so in PI we have this concept called variable name substitution, so I can define a variable. So here I've defined the file name as percentage MID percentage. I go into the target, I say, hey, this MID is nothing but the message ID of my message. So now my file is going to get created with my message ID. Alright, now the other thing we have to do is we have to go into the module tab and add 2 modules. Alright, so the first module as always is going to be AF underscore modules request one way bean. Alright, and I'll say local enterprise bean and move this up. Okay, let's call it rec all. And then after the call SAP adapter, I'm going to add one more module. This is a new module that we are going to use, and it's going to be called wait response bean. Wait response bean. So this file adapter is now going to wait for a response. Okay, and I'm going to call it wait. Okay, in the module key for the request, say pass through and say value true. Okay. So with that, a file adapter, receiver file adapter is done. Now let's go ahead and create our sender file adapter. Okay, so I'm going to call it CC sync async bridge file underscore sender underscore 00. All right. Now the file is going to be sender. Adapter type is file. The direction is sender. Now the directory will remain the same as my receiver file adapter. It's going to wait for a file in this directory. Alright, okay, let's put it into the other directory just here. Okay, and sorry, this is my sender directory. I will not save this. Do not save. Okay, now I'm going to go into Sync-Async bridge, copy this path here, go into my sender directory, and whatever is the file created, PI is just going to pick up that file. We will change this a little later, and rather I'll just put it here like this. Okay, and I'll say pick up, no, sorry, let's just do this. Okay, let it go into the Sync-Async file, and here I'll wait for a file that is going to, it will pick up any file that gets written here, and it's going to delete the file. Okay, I'm going to delete the file. Now I go into my module tab, and for my receiver file adapter, my sender file adapter, I have to delete the existing module. So this is my sender file adapter. I'm going to delete the module, add 2 new modules. The first module is going to be a dynamic configuration bean, AF modules / dynamic configuration bean, and I'm call it local enterprise bean. Okay, AF underscore module / dynamic configuration bean. The direction of the slash typically doesn't matter. Okay, next AF underscore module / notify response bean. If you remember, in this receiver file adapter to be told wait response bean to say wait for the response. Now we are saying notify the response, let the module key be the same. Here I'll say module key as dynamic configuration bean, and here I'll say notify, right? And now I go into dynamic configuration bean here, and I'm going to say key.0. Here I'll say value.0. Parameter name, I'm going to call it write http://sap.com xi/system/file space file name and write it to message dot correlation ID. Alright, correlation ID. Perfect. So we've created a sender file adapter. The sender file adapter is just going to pick up whatever the request, and here it's going to pick up the request and delete the file. Whatever is the file. So whatever is the file created by the receiver file adapter here is going to get picked up. Once the PI picks up this file, it is going to, let's go into the module, it's going to go in, set the message, read the file name, which is our message ID, and set it as a correlation ID. We remember, if you remember the BPM scenario, we had created a correlation. This is similar to that. So you're creating a correlation ID. And very importantly, you need to go into the advanced tab and select set adapter specific attributes and make sure that the file name is selected. With this, save your communication channel. Now there's just one change that I would like to propose in the enterprise service repository. Let's just go ahead and create a mapping. Alright, so let's just go ahead, create a mapping, and the mapping is going to be Sync-Async bridge underscore file concat. Alright, so my request is going to be the request structure, my response is going to be my response structure, and here I'm going to just concat field 1 and field 2. Alright, so I'm just creating a mapping. So this mapping is going to concatenate the data. Now I'm going to create an operation mapping as well. So OM, let's call it Sync-Async bridge. Alright, and now I'm going to say the source interface is going to be my synchronous source interface, and my target interface is going to be my inbound asynchronous target interface. I say read operations, and now it's going to ask me for the mapping, so I select my mapping. 1 minute, is this a synchronous service interface? Outbound synchronous, perfect. Alright, and now I select my mapping. Okay, just one change as well in this outbound, in the inbound asynchronous. Let's just do one change. Sorry, I'll have to save this first. Okay, now in the inbound asynchronous service interface, something's wrong, so I'm going to close all. Something's wrong with my mouse. Okay, perfect. Now it's okay. So I'm just going to change here, instead of the request I'm going to use the response structure. Alright, cancel, delete this info message from here. Okay, change, yes, ignore the warning, then drag this message type here and drop it here. Alright, so basically PI is going to now map the request to the response. I say read operations, and now my mapping is displayed. So when PI is creating the file, it is going to make sure the data is concatenated, and then we'll get the response back. Okay, so with that we go ahead and activate the change here. Alright, so this is another issue. If you see, it says, hey, the source interface is synchronous but the target interface is asynchronous. Alright, so we have to make a change in the inbound service interface as well. Let's make it inbound, make it synchronous. Alright, change, that's okay. I'll now fix it. So go into your inbound asynchronous request. Sorry about all the confusion. Go into here. Now my source is my request structure and my target is my response structure. Alright, perfect. Now Now my target is also going to be my, actually both my source and my target, let it be my response structure. Alright, so service interface, even though it says IA, it should be synchronous. This is response and this is the response. Now let's go ahead, operation mapping, edit, say read operations. My mapping gets executed in the request. For the response, there's no need to have any mapping. And now let's go ahead and activate the change. And now that the change is activated, let's go back to the integration directory. So sorry about that. So a couple of changes that we did in the server, just to summarize the changes that we did. The first change we did was in the service interface, inbound service interface, we made it as a synchronous service interface, and the message type for both the request and the response is the response. We then defined a message mapping that is now going to concatenate the two fields, and then we defined an operation mapping where this is going to be used as a request mapping. So this is a synchronous and this is also the synchronous. Alright, with this let's go ahead and create our integrated configuration. So I'm going to go ahead, create integrated configuration and say bs underscore file system underscore 00. My sender service interface is, I don't want to, I'm just going to use this, sorry, it's Sync-Async bit, so outbound synchronous, because otherwise my selection help will take too long. Perfect, apply. So I gave my service interface here. It's going to ask me what my sender channel is. My sender channel is my SOAP channel. So Sync-Async SOAP sender, perfect. The receiver is again my BS file system 00. I go into my receiver interface. It will ask me for the mapping. I select the mapping. It will ask me for the outbound processing, and here I'll select my file adapter. Sync-Async file receiver 00. Alright. So with that, the first integrated configuration is done. And what's going to happen? I send a synchronous request. It goes to the receiver file adapter. In the receiver file adapter, it is going to write the file with the message ID. And after it writes, it is now going to wait for a response. Alright. Next, my sender file adapter is going to go and pick up this file. Here, let's just change the polling interval to 10 seconds. Alright. And make sure it is delete. So now the file that is written by the receiver file adapter is going to be read by the sender file adapter, and when it is reading it, it's going to read the file name and set it as the correlation. So the message ID, which was the receiver file and file name, becomes the correlation, and once it becomes the correlation, our work is done. Alright, with this, let's go ahead and create the second integrated configuration. This integrated configuration is just a dummy integrated configuration. So let's just go ahead and select the response, SIOA response. This is the service interface, that's the other service interface that we had created, and select my sender file adapter, file sender 00, apply, and my receiver is going to be BS file system 00, and here we just say dummy. You don't need to worry about it, you just say dummy. Alright, it does say give me a receiver channel. Just select any channel. In this case, I'm just going and reselecting my Sync-Async. In fact, this ICO will not be used in the runtime. It is just for a configuration type. So whatever parameters you put here is a dummy. The only thing you need to make sure is that this sender channel is a valid sender channel. Okay. So with this, let's go ahead and activate our changes. Alright. Now when our changes are activated, let's go ahead and upload the file through CG3Z. So this is my, sorry, there's no need to upload a file. We are just going to go, because this is going to get triggered using a SOAP scenario, we're going to say display it. And before that, let's just go here to AL11, back, double click. Alright, double click. Now once we trigger the scenario, we should see a Sync-Async bridge file. Alright, so how do I get, I'm opening the integrated configuration that uses my SOAP sender channel. I say go to the integrated configuration, say display WSDL, get the URL, and I'm going to launch SOAP UI. Right, so I'm launching SOAP UI to trigger the call to PI. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to go file, I'm saying new SOAP project. In my new SOAP project, I'm going to call Sync-Async bridge. I'm giving my request. I'm saying please go ahead. It's going to ask me for my username. I'm giving my username. Perfect. My username is ready. My request is ready. So I'm going to double click. And now I'm going to give my first name. Field name is going to be ABC. Field 2 is DEF. We saw how to set up SAP PI, so I'm not going in detail. Go into authentication, select add new authorization, say basic, and give your user details. So I'll say my username, I'll give my password, and now when I execute, there's a problem. What's the problem? Object not found. So the module AF underscore module request one-way bean. So it says that the module is incorrect. So let's look at our receiver file adapter. Outbound processing AF underscore module. It says I'm not able to find this module. I have a feeling it's a slash. Let me just have a look at one of our scenarios that we built. Module. Yeah, we have to use the slash in the other direction. Request one-way bean. AF underscore modules wait response bean. Let's just make sure. This is perfect. And I'll just check if it is request one-way bean. Response one-way bean. Sorry, it is response one-way bean. That was the problem, not the slash. So let's look at the PPT I had here. It says request one-way bean. This is wrong. It should not be could be request one-way bean. I'll have a look. Let's first fix this. I don't know if it's the slash, but so let's first see if it's a slash. Sorry, I'll close all. Save. I go to file receiver, module, request one-way bean. Okay, so this is going to just change it. Alright, it could be the slash that was a problem, so let's activate it. Activating my channel. And once my channel is activating, I'm just checking the cache status. Yeah, it's now activated. Now I'm going to trigger. I'm deleting. Okay, it says that the module. Okay, perfect. Unknown message header. So this is good. So that module is done. And then it says, hey, I'm not error during variable name substitution, unknown message header for message ID, right? So let's look at that. It is percentage MID message colon message ID. I have a feeling there's a typing error here. Message underscore message ID. So you see that. All right. Sorry about that. So I say message colon message underscore ID. Save it. Activate this. Activate. Check my cache. Everything is in green. It's still getting activated. Now it's in green. Now I'm going to delete this error and trigger the message. So now something's happening. Let's go into AL11 and you got the response back. If you go into AL11, now you'll see the Sync-Async folder is done and there's nothing here, right? Let's trigger once more. And when we trigger once more, if we refresh here, we see the file is here. This is the message ID. And now once the file will get picked up again in 10 seconds, the file got picked up and we got the response here. All right. Again, let's trigger one more time. I trigger the message and the response came back way too fast. Okay. So let's do one thing. Let's go into the polling interval here. File sender. Let's make it 30 seconds, right? I made it 10 seconds if you remember. Let's make it 25 seconds. Activate so that we can see what happens, right? I'm activating the change, and now once I'm activating the change, I'm deleting the response here. I execute. Now if you go here and refresh, you see this is the file and this is the concatenated content. If I go back, now if I refresh in 25 seconds, the file should get disappeared, and this message ID will then be used as the correlation ID to map it back to the response. Okay, 25 seconds seems to be way too long. Find file has disappeared and the response has come back here. Alright, now let's look at the logs. Alright, I'm going to close everything. Going to log in again to my message monitoring. I'm going to my adapter engine, message monitor, say go for the past hour. Alright, so BS file system 00, there are two messages that had failed, and let's go into database. Perfect. So if you look at the message log for this guy, this is the center file adapter. It picked up the message, it did the dynamic configuration where it set the correlation, and then it notified that, hey, this is the message that needs to get called. It's notifying it. It notified the target system, and with that it passed the message back to the calling application. Now if you go here into the logs, the SOAP adapter was called, the request one-way bean was called, and then it was waiting for the response. It writes the message and then it is waiting for the response. If you see, it was 1325, 1322, and then it, after 20 seconds it got the response. It's retrieving the response, and once it gets the response, it's pushing the response back. Alright, so with this we've come to the end of the Sync-Async bridge as well, where we have triggered a synchronous call, we pushed it to a receiver file adapter, a sender file adapter picks up the message and pushes it out. Alright, and how did we build this scenario? To summarize it, we went into the enterprise service repository. You had a request structure, a response structure, 3 service interface, one outbound asynchronous, one outbound synchronous, one inbound synchronous, one outbound asynchronous, which is a dummy service interface, then one message mapping where you are concatenating the data, and one outbound mapping. For the inbound synchronous, the response structures are the same in this case, but in your actual flows it can be different. Then we went to the integrated configuration. We created a receiver file adapter. In the receiver file adapter, the file name is set to %MID %. You go into the advanced tag, make it as message : message _ ID. In our case, it was message ID that had caused the problem. Make sure it's message _ ID. Go into the module tab. This backslash has to be this backslash. The other forward backslash is not supported. Put the module as request one-way bean. It is used to convert the request message from a synchronous request message to an asynchronous request message. It makes the call to a receiver file adapter, and then it waits for the response. The file sender adapter picks up the message, and then it has a module where you're reading the file name, and once it reads the file name, it sets it into the correlation ID. Make sure you have the adapter specific message attributes file name set in the sender file adapter. And then you had 2 integrated configuration. The first integrated configuration was with the SOAP sender to the file receiver with the BC file system and the file receiver, and the second integrated configuration was a sender file adapter where you had and in the receiver interfaces you just had to type dummy, and the outbound processing can be any dummy communication channel. Alright, so with this we've come to the end of the Sync-Async bridge, and I shall see you again in the final session of this training, where we will be taking a backup, or we will be looking at how do we take a backup of all the developments that we have done. Alright, so I shall see you again in the next session, which is going to be a very quick session on how do we take a backup of all the development we've done so far. So see you then soon. Bye bye.